Welcome to the Releasing Community podcast. This is where we share our love for releasing and the Sedona Method, where we share our experiences, benefits, and insights we've got from using the method. My name is Katja Törmänen, and me and Stephen Robert Carlson will be hosting this podcast.
Hello everybody. Hello, Reva. Thanks.
And today our guest is Reva Seybolt. And she has been a certified Sedona Method coach since 2009. And she has also been hands-on healer and a life coach since 1980s. Since she graduated from Harvard Business School, she spent several years focusing on creating a holistic approach on entrepreneurship for women business owners. Currently, her focus is on the Sedona Method and especially on aging issues. She offers both individual and group sessions, both in person in Vermont in USA and online on Zoom. I hope I got it right. Warmly welcome, Reva. Nice to have you here.
Thank you.
So let's start. Always start with our guests. So please tell us, how did you find the Sedona Method?
It was brought to me on a silver platter, actually. Back in 2005, a friend of mine signed up for any old course that Omega was doing that was in an island. It was in one of the islands, I don't remember which one. And she went, and it was the Sedona course. And Amy and Hale were there, and only 5 people signed up.
Wow.
So she was one of 5 people, and on this beautiful island with Hale and Amy, and they all got to be good friends, needless to say. So she came back, and she said, "You've got to do this. It's incredible. I want a releasing partner." And that's how it started. We started releasing every day, Donna, Lowry, and I, and we released for, every day for 10 years.
Wow, every day for 10 years.
Well, you missed a few, but basically.
That's
Yeah, it was our
amazing.
wake-up call. We'd wake up. She hated mornings, but we never could get to it at night. So we'd wake up and talk to each other in the morning and then go about our day. It was fantastic. And I highly suggest that to anybody who wants to do releasing. Find a partner, even if it's not the most perfect partner, and go for it, because it's incredible. And she was a therapist too, so she loved it. And we both took the coach training together.
Wow, that sounds really amazing. Like 10 years, so you really took a deep dive. So how do you still, what do you think were the best changes you noticed in your own life?
Early on, I'm an incest survivor and other child abuse. And, I'd done lots and lots of therapy and lots of healing around that. But I was still kind of afraid of my mind that, had sat with a 2x4 and beat you up, and kind of afraid of my emotions. More despair kind of emotion than anger at that point. And I suddenly realized, using Sedona Method, that I didn't have to be afraid of myself anymore, that I had a tool that would take some time, but that would stop the beat up and the feeling of blocked and the limiting beliefs. But I was more aware then of being afraid of myself, i.e. what I perceived then as myself, my mind. And so it was an incredible gift. And Donna and I did groups back then, and back then was more pre-internet, so we did groups in person, and got a group of people in the community of Northeastern Connecticut where we live to do it. And it was fun.
That sounds like a lot of fun, indeed. So, so you notice first kind of not having to be afraid of your mind. I think that's really beautifully put. As I think most of us are afraid of our minds, even though we don't know it, kind of because we trust that's the truth.
It's a really interesting way of putting it, but yeah, there's a certain truth in that. To be afraid of yourself, your mind, your own emotional reactions. Yeah, I can relate to that.
I was a good Al-Anon and assisting alcoholic kind of person. So I went to a fair amount of AA meetings to get my husband fixed, right? And their description of the vulture on your shoulder that whispers in your ear and eats you as it does, and just was really vivid to me. And it was actually really why I got into Buddhism too, more Tibetan Buddhism, because I was looking for some way to work with the mind rather than be controlled by the mind.
So did you study or start Buddhism before Sedona or after or at the same time?
Before, but I didn't have a group near me. I had both, my healing teacher had worked with the Bunpo tradition, so I'd done a fair amount of Bun. And then my sister was part of a Tibetan community here in the States, and I did that. And I dabbled, but there was no way to do it every day at home. And so I was sort of went in and out, and then sort of realized, well, wait a minute, the Sedona Method, that's it.
Wow, that's beautiful. So do you still, are you still working with Buddhism, or is it still part of your life?
Yes. I moved it to Vermont and was complaining to Spirit that everything, the land I'd found was perfect. I was actually whining, not complaining, but there was no Buddhist center. And I was driving on a road about an hour later, and there was a Tibetan Buddhist center that nobody had told me about in my own town.
Wow.
So I was like, okay, I guess we're buying this land. I have to say that, you know, having done it since 2005 and Buddhism before, you know, you go in and out. You don't. You do it really active, and then you sort of back off a little bit, and then you do really active, you sort of back off. So there've been times in my life where, I mean, I've been doing the releasing all the times, but there's been times where with clients I did more or less, and with the Buddhism more or less. It's sort of, it's the path that I'm on, and sometimes I decided to go elsewhere. Or Reva decided, or whoever.
Yes. So we do know that Sedona Method doesn't matter what kind of religious type or practice you do. It kind of works with everything. It doesn't require any of them. So how have you found? Do they combine, or is there something that do they work together, or are they totally different approaches in your life?
So technically, Buddhism isn't a religion. It was technically speaking. I'm not good at sitting meditation. I'm good at walking, but I'm not good at sitting. And that was always a hard part. What I find, and this is my opinion, I'm not sure a lot of Buddhists would agree with me, but I think this is a faster way to get to non-duality than Buddhism. I love my community here. I love the people. I love what we do. At this point in my life, I have no memory for nouns, let alone Tibetan nouns. And at this point in my life, I just find the simplicity of the Sedona Method better for me. I know that I'm not sure if I went and sat down at my Tibetan in my Sangha and held a sign how popular I would be, but we live in a small town and most of the people know what I do. I really find that engaging the mind just takes me off the path, that I need to use the mind. But when I start engaging in all the who, what, where, what, I start getting in fights with the Rinpoche, like, it's not that way, and blah, blah, blah. And so for me, I find it a faster way to non-duality and no self, and it's beauty. It took me a while to be able to say that. I was afraid the Tibetan gods were going to come down and strike me dead. But in truth, I prefer the Sedona Method. And I still go to Sangha, and I still participate, and I still listen to Bun and Tibetan Buddhism, and love that community, and love, because I feel like we're all going the same place. I just like this path and they like that path. And it's a place where I can go locally and be with other people who are committed to mindfulness.
Yeah, that's really beautiful put. So how quickly did you start working with other people? You had that one releasing partner, but how quickly did you find others or start facilitating?
A week.
Oh, wow.
Because then there was no stories about who, what, when, where you could do things. There was no certified coach. It was, Hale was still trying to run the organization with Amy. So you sort of jumped in and did what you did. And so we just started running groups and doing that just because we wanted to share the good news.
Oh,
Probably a little proselytizing in there too, but.
that's amazing. So did you kind of you did everything at the same time, so I don't know if you can tell apart what did what, but did you find that facilitating others or sharing the good news, that it affected your own process, or was it different than practicing it yourself or with a partner?
Yes. So I had a hands-on healing practice that I had in different places around because where I lived was in the country and there just weren't very many people who lived there at the time. And I found, as we all find, that by doing it with other people, you often release on the asking end faster even than you do on the receiving end. So I love doing that. Couple things I noticed was it made me crazy when people would change the language, because one of the things I love about the Sedona Method is the language is so beautiful and elegant. It's so clear. It's so amazing, clean. And so I get crazy when people stick in love instead of approval and things like that. The other thing I found that at that point, for whatever reason, because one of my offices where I did stuff was right outside of Cambridge, Mass. We got a lot of therapists and a lot of people who were academics. And I found I could do the Sedona Method as long as I didn't call it that. Because I could go in and lead them through it and stuff like that. But if I called it the Sedona Method and sort of taught it to them, their minds would go, well, can't do that. That's too easy. So people would, can you do that thing that I like? Which was the same as the Sedona Method, but and I always found that amusing. Is like, okay, well, we'll do that thing that you like. We just won't call it what it is.
What you're saying is so interesting because it matches my experience. The less that I actually say or introduce or explain, describe the method, just, are you willing to try something? Go into it. That is really the easiest way to introduce it to somebody. The more that I explain, the more resistance.
I mean, if you're going to do a releasing group and stuff like that, you kind of have to explain the tools. And it's a funny thing because people will say, well, that's a really funny name, the Sedona Method. And you'd sort of have to explain the history of it. But, it needs to have some name or something that's got no connotations. But yes.
Yeah.
So I always feel like, having been released this long, I should be able to say that I walk on water because I've been doing it this long. But, I feel like particularly I decided when I moved to Vermont, since I didn't know anybody and the internet age is coming, as both of you know, I'm not a lover of technical stuff, that I would focus on the one thing that I thought was most important in life, which was the Sedona Method. And so I redid my website and set up everything like that. And I think in a sense that having left it as a mixed thing might have been better because of what we're just talking about. Because I find that people come to me because of Reva Seybolt. So a few people come because I'm listed on the coaches list, but most people that come and stay come to me because they like approach who I am as finding positive. And so I think having done it as a mixture might have been might be a better move just for all of you. Yeah.
Reva, do you find that you work mostly in person, face-to-face, or do you do a lot remotely as well?
I do mostly remotely. I have a few clients in person. I do a group in person. That is, up and down depending on people's schedules. I find out here in the country where everything is a half an hour to 45 minutes away minimum, that people don't really want to travel. Now that Zoom is here, they don't want to travel. I find Zoom convenient, but as a healer and one who reads energy, because that's really my passion is energy, is it's harder to do on Zoom. And so I missed that. I did a group the other day of for a local social service agency, and it was in somebody's garden. And people got it so quickly, and it was so much fun, and it really fed me too, to being people. So I would love to do more people, but reality's reality.
So how do people find you?
I live in a town of 700 people, so to give you an idea of where I live. So people find me word of mouth. I send out regular emails to my mailing list, and then I've done a lot of stuff online. I haven't done a lot of paid advertising, but I've done a lot of things online, and which have not I have a tech help, thank God, wonderful woman. I think if it weren't for her, I would have quit the online stuff, because she has much more patience than I do.
I agree with you about that. It's really amazing we have these technical possibilities. We wouldn't have got together ever without this. You're both across the ocean over there, and but it is a different energy when you are in the same room or in the same garden with the people. So, but one of the wonders is that it does still work across the digital world and waves and whatever this is. So I do. But
your experience inspires me, because I do most of my work remotely, but I'm actually interested now in starting a face-to-face group, because it's been my experience that face-to-face is actually so much more powerful. So I just wanted to offer you that. Yeah, thank you.
Well, Delilah has been a great inspiration for me, because she really got going by offering free groups through psychotherapy, offering groups through hospital and through other places. And she does a lot of that. And I can see now that if and I'm going to this fall go around to some of the local places that want free things. Because I think if I could do free things for groups like that, it'll feed me, even though it may not feed me financially. It'll feed me. It's feeling like, at this point in my life, particularly, you want to give back to the world that's been generous to you. And yeah, like that. So I'd like to do some more stuff like that starting later in the fall.
And you say that you focus now more on aging issues. So could you tell a little bit more how you find Sedona Method and aging working together?
So I just found for me that when I have clients that are struggling about where to go to college or what to do in college, and do parents, I can be there for them. But I love being there for people whose, issues are somewhat familiar. So I got the aging together, and it's been really interesting. I've had some groups here in Vermont of local and not. The main issue always with groups is finding a time where people can get together. But we had one woman who was in her 40s and one woman who was 95. And it was so much fun, because you have so much a spectrum of age. And where I got into was coming off of COVID, because what I noticed was people's fear was just so phenomenal around COVID. Yeah. And there was fear of death. It was fear of illness, sickness, and death, to quote the Buddhists. And so what I thought was, wow, why not, here I am, why not do a group that is on aging and illness, sickness, and death? And I had been a death doula for a friend, and had really gone through that process with her, which was such a different experience than most of my experiences of death. And I felt more like I had something I could bring from specific experience. So I've been doing it, and it's great, because you have people who, like, you're feeling like, I can't remember anything, I'm da-da-da. And then you have somebody in the group who just gave up her driver's license, and you suddenly go, whoa. So what I feel like is I went through something I called practicing death when I left Vermont, Connecticut, having been there for 40 years, and moved to Vermont, where I really only knew one person, a friend, not a significant other. And starting all over again. And I felt like the Reva Seybolt of up till I was late 60s had died. She was dead. And I had to create a new beingness, awareness of beingness. And also I, was beginning to see that Vermont's not exactly a young state. So you see a lot of older people. And sort of thinking, well, this is where I am. And everybody, you talk about it and they're so afraid. And I'm not particularly afraid. I mean, I'm fearful, but of certain things, but Reva has fear, trying to walk this line here. And I just realized how much needed it was. And the people who come love it and look forward to it because some are at home, can't get out. And this is a way they can talk to other people. And I run it a little looser than a regular Sedona group in the sense of people often make comments to other people. And it's been fantastic. I had to take the summer off for my reasons, but I will start them up again in the fall. Haven't quite figured out if you all have tried to get your name listed in all sorts of places on the internet, you know that the Sedona Method is not something you can check off. So you have to find other things to check off, and then you have to find a way to differentiate yourself from everybody else, including all of us. So I think the aging, I'm going to really push that in the fall because I love doing it. And people, there's something about aging where you can't mess around anymore. It's here. We are going to die. I can't pretend I'm not going to die anymore. I am going to die. And it might happen sooner than later. And my memory is going. And I have friends who have Parkinson's who have no memory. And how do you, people want to talk about when you go to a friend who has no memory and you're just sitting there, releasing is a fantastic way to be present for them. Oh, and that's the other thing. Being present is to me that's what the Sedona Method gives us. Besides the sense of non-duality, it's being present and being in here and now. And for aging people, they get it. They get there's nothing, all of that's gone and all of this probably ain't going to happen. So all there is present. So my experience is if people select themselves as wanting to be interested in aging issues, it's about how to be in the present and not spend your whole time crying about the past or the future.
I think.
Well, I just have to say that I find myself here visiting my aging parents who just had a health emergency, and what you just said absolutely applies. There's only here, only now. That's all that actually matters, and that you can deal with anyway. Thank you. Very appropriate.
Yes.
And I've been talking with people who are quite young and are still totally terrified of the idea of death. And people who are in their 30s, 40s, even 20s, and they're terrified of the thought of, well, obviously anyone can die at any point, but still statistically that's not very likely for them. And I think Sedona Method offers amazing tools for letting go of that fear and kind of facing it and acknowledging it and seeing beyond it. So I really think you are doing a marvelous job with that. It's great. Yeah.
One of the things that, the Buddhists talk about aging, sickness, and death. And I realized if we're not scared of death, we're scared of aging or sickness. And what I realized is it's a marketing tool, forgive me. But we're all afraid of aging, sickness, and death, and we all have to come to terms with it. And what I realize is that you don't have to be afraid of any of them. Really, you can release, and so that, by releasing on one, you're releasing in all of them. And so I sometimes just when I want to go higher or whatever, I work with aging, sickness, and death and just sort of see if I can raise my bottom, so to speak.
So
I also think that beingness and the concept of non-duality as some place to live, not as just an intellectual play tool, is often more interesting to people who are facing aging, sickness, and death, because they want to come to some resolve about what's going to happen to this mind, body, personality.
Mm. Yeah, and there's less everyday stuff that comes in the way. Like you said, the future
Mhm.
future plans might not come, and the past is already gone. So, yeah.
Well, plus the process of aging and dying has a way of actually identifying or bringing up what is most important. So, again, just briefly, in 2019, my father nearly died, and it brought us all together. That he said to me yesterday that his experience of, congestive heart failure, being in the hospital, was one of the greatest and most wonderful things that ever happened to him, which of course sounds absurd on the surface. But then you have to understand that that was an enormously powerful experience that really brought us together and showed us what was important to each other. And yeah.
So the thing that I find, you can tell you don't have to ask me too many questions to wind me up, but the thing that I find that's been the most challenging for this person around the Sedona Method is the concept of no doer. Because Reva's personality and her answer to the abuse and everything was to go fix things, do things. And I feel like that's been the place that was the hardest over the last 15 years for me to look at, because the concept of there now being a Reva on some level, well, no big deal, but the concept of being there's no doing, whoa. And I think that's the one that I come back to that's intrigues me, and keep the point of my exploration is, that I have to come back to every day, all the time, is that there is no doer, there's just doing. And for years I fought in my mind with Hale about that. That's where I sort of pulled back, because I couldn't handle the concept. This ego couldn't handle the concept of no doing, and that, if I'm not a doer. And so that's the one I keep working on, and it's getting better. I'm not so attached. But, when push comes to shove, that's where this person goes to is, well, I can go fix something. I can go do something about something. I can go build a pavilion, even though I can't do anything about climate change. And again, it's not wrong. It's just I have had and still have a fairly good attachment to being a doer, a parent doer.
Oh, I think it's very common for nearly all of us. I would think, yeah. The thing that really shook me when Hale started moving into more non-dual way was the idea that there's no meaning. Like, nothing has a point. And I was really, really rebelling against that. Like, I want a meaning. And it's still something when I have a lousy day, I will like, there's no meaning. I struggle with that. So wasn't anything for you, Reva, or it was just the doership that you wanted to hold on to?
Well, it's like, to me, there was only one want: control. I mean, that's all there is. So if all you want is control, and they've got to have control in order to do things, survival, approval, oneness, they're all over here. It's control. And again, what I got clear lately, I don't know how, but the last year or two is, and the mentorship has actually helped it in some frustrating ways, is like, okay, if I am not the doer and I don't have control, I can jump to the idea of beingness. But what I've gotten closer in understanding is this mind body got programmed to control, because that's how I survived the child abuse. And that's all. And I've done years of therapy and this, that, and the other, and it's still in there. Well, yeah. I mean, one could say I came in to do that work, or whatever, however you want to say it. But I'm really getting clear this mind body is always going to want control. And this mind body is always going to want to do. What I just have to do is what you mentioned, is step away and remember that it's just the mind body that wants control. It's not me. And that's sort of, I think, the gift I've gotten to in the last, because back when Hale didn't do no way. I mean, he started it, but he didn't do it very much. And now there's a solace in the idea that, okay, the mind body does what the mind body does, and I can do the best I can with it. but I'm not it. And that gives me the breathing space when I do a real fuck up for something really stupid. Excuse me. When I do whatever, that it's okay. All the mind body did what the mind body does best, and the mind body is growing and being able to understand better.
So
And
it
again,
comes,
belief, the idea that we're not the mind body is just another belief system. I mean, you know,
mhm.
someone I happen to like and think is closer to the truth, and beingness, but in the end, it's just another belief system.
But it's a more freeing way of approaching it. You sort of hit this point of so what? You know, this is just the equipment I'm working with, and this reaction simply happens, and so what? So what if Reva wants to control everything? That's just how Reva works. So what? And that takes all of the contraction, all of the sting, all of the pain and suffering away, frankly. You know, it's just the equipment you're working with. Fine.
Yep. So where it came to me with the crisis was with George, oh my God, how can I forget his name? Who, the race for racism. That's when I began to realize that so much of this was white privilege, white female privilege. And
George Floyd, you're thinking of.
yeah.
Yes.
And that's brains. And when I really did, I spent about 2 years doing a lot of reading with a couple friends of mine that also came from similar backgrounds, so it wasn't so painful when the shame came up. And I realized that, you know, again, that was the programming that I got in the 1950s about what was real. And my parents were upwardly mobile, and they wanted to do well in the world. And they taught me to be a good person, but they also taught me to be blind to half the world. And as I began through my reading to discover this incredible culture and that I had seen in traveling in Asia and Latin America, but had been apart from, to see this incredible culture and this and of Black America, and what I was missing was like, whoa, I don't have to have all those waspy men. I could have men with some energy. Anyways, that also was a big part of realizing that this mind body was doing the best it can with what it had, and the intentions are right. But I don't have to feel ashamed of things that I couldn't have known.
So it kind of comes back to what we've spoken about Sedona Method before too, about it leading to acceptance, like us learning to accept the body mind, what it does, what it's been doing. And it kind of comes back to, you didn't choose to become the kind of person that you are. So, and nobody chose, not even your parents chose to raise you that way. It was what happened. That's the thing that has been for me, like I can kind of see easier that, okay, I'm not doing things that just happen. But when it feels other people do things for me, then it's easier to start blaming or judging, and then, no, nobody's choosing anything, nobody's doing anything. That's been a learning curve for me too, like people do what they do. And we have a brilliant tool to accept both our reactions and their reactions. So,
and the key, of course, is simply being in the moment present and just observing all of it is happening as it happens, without, including the reactions that may be coming up for Reva, for Katja, for Stephen. And then again, so what?
So what is my favorite, but one has to be gentle sometimes when one says it to people.
Well, I'm saying it with you, and I think that we can say it with each other, but truly, yeah. I don't say that to my parents, for example, because they're still taking things very seriously, as most people do. You know, this is 3 dimensions, you know, the passage of time, and, you know, at the end you lose everything, right? Or so it would seem, you know.
So I have a question for you guys. What I found is my nature of my personal friendships has changed over time. And the more I do the Sedona Method, and it's different. And sometimes it's hard, because one of the reasons I went for the Sedona Method was because in my work, I get tired of stories repeating themselves. And sometimes I feel like I can be judgmental about stories repeating themselves in the general world out there. So I'm curious how you all do with your friendships who don't understand or know Sedona, not just family where you're sort of, they're there, but you're finding friends that you really can be heartfelt with.
I think the first, no, it wasn't first, but on my first retreat I ever went to, I only had one question I dared to ask from Hale. That was about words and writing. But the second retreat, the only question I had was about friendships and how I feel it. The connection is hard to get or come by, or we don't connect at all. And in a way, Sedona Method has brought me lots of people who are dear friends to me. Of course, most of them I meet online because most of them are somewhere abroad. And it has changed, that there are definitely friends that I don't think much have totally dropped away, but I see them less and less because I don't feel the urge. They clearly don't feel the urge to meet. There's kind of a less, though in a way I say that it's easier to see them when I see them because I'm not hooked on the idea that I need to get something particular from them, or I'm not expecting it to be a huge dramatic big friendship. I'm just thinking, okay, we'll meet and see how it goes. But yeah, it can be painful too. It's not an easy and smooth way always. How about you, Stephen?
Oh, it certainly changed the nature of friendship for me. Well, for one thing, I think I'm much more comfortable with solitude. I'm absolutely at peace with that. Don't mind it. The lockdown, COVID, and everything, fine. Really. I don't find myself needing that much from others in terms of, well, what was I looking for before? I don't know, maybe approval, security, resources, different things. I don't know. I tend to find myself, older friendships, you sort of, well, for example, here I am in my hometown where I grew up, and so there are old friends around. And yeah, you see things from a different perspective. It's like, oh, that's exactly what I always liked about you. I can see that now. You see? Or like, I don't really feel the same connection that we did, and that's okay, because you're occupied with those things that I don't find interesting, because that's not, relevant to me. I find that kind of thing happens. But also there's a certain serendipity about things, because really, well, just to give you an example, there's somebody, I live in Northern California, not here, and somebody just reached out to me recently and said, hey, it's been a while, let's have a coffee. Not somebody I would consider a close friend, but somebody who I'd met in other circumstances, for a few years, so there was some connection. And the point really is that we sat down for a coffee and I was present for him totally. Let's just see who you are, what's here and now. And it was a completely different experience than I'd had before. It was like, oh, okay, nice to see this that I hadn't seen before. Right? So I don't really feel that bad about friendships that drop away, because that's the nature of friendships. We go through a connection, disconnection, opening, closing. And really on some level, well, a lot of friendships are more superficial than others and more contextual. I know this person from that job. I know this person from living in this town. And that's where we had our connection, and that was the context. Whereas there are just some people that, you see them again and it's like you'd never, ever been away. And there was always something to say, right?
I was actually talking about this with with the Sedona Method friend recently, and she said it kind of in a funny way, or kind of quite describing way, that there are friendships and then there are light friendships. And I really thought, well, that is kind of, the light friendship can become a more substantial friendship at any point, but it seems some friendships go kind of like dormant for a while. You don't see them or meet them, or there's no grounds for it, and then they can kind of be reborn. But it does, it has changed the way I kind of use my time, and I'm kind of maybe more choosing with whom I want to spend the time with. So I'm not always going when there is a kind of a meeting or something happening. I'm not necessarily the first to go. Sometimes I am, so it depends.
Thank you.
Actually, just one more thing came up, which is, it seems to me there's a difference between friendliness and real connection. I took a job at a supermarket a while back, and I find myself friendly with a lot of different people there. It's just easy to be sociable, to be, just to be in the moment and react to what's happening and just enjoy. That's fine. That's friendliness. But then once in a while you come across somebody and you just feel like, wait a second, okay, there's something here. You can feel it. And I'm just wondering, to me, it seems that somehow, in fact, that connection is actually kind of like a sense that we have business together, meaning not necessarily making money, of course. I'm using the American lexicon. There's something that we can help each other with, experience together with. I can help you, you can help me, whatever it is. There's something that is moving us forward. Does that make any sense? But that's just the sense of it that I have.
Sideline. One of the things I was very lucky in my timing was I got to go to the Sedona retreats. And for about 5, 6, 7 years, I went at least once a year to Sedona in that wonderful round room, and got to know Hale and got to know the people who, all of whom of my friends ended up in the coach training. But I just wanted anybody listening to tell you that it's really worth doing it in person if you can put it together somehow. I miss, right now, West Coast is a far distance, but I really miss that coming together and just hanging and having meals together and everything. So to anybody listening to this, really think about going to the retreats in person.
I agree, totally. 1000%. Oh, I can agree as well. My first retreat was actually in Santa Cruz just earlier this year, and it was astonishing. It felt like a meeting of like minds or kindles. It was quite interesting. Even though some of them I didn't really get to know that well, others I did, but powerful stuff.
And that was my, first introduction to all of the Europeans who would come over, and we'd all hang together and giggle together and have a great time. We'd rent a house together, and it was really fun to have that kind of, and I still feel incredible fondness for all of the ones that I don't talk to anymore just because of life. Yeah.
Well, let's hope we'll meet in person at some point, either this way or that way across the ocean. But how is, Reva, your practice these days? You are doing groups, you have clients, but how do you practice yourself? Or do you have a favorite thing you like to stick to?
I have a new releasing partner because logistics, Don and I logistically didn't work out for a while. So I looked up my other favorite person from the Sedona groups, a woman named Cheryl Wright, who is a coach and lives in Iowa now. And she and I are releasing partners also. And we talk less often, maybe twice a week because of time. There's not a good time we can find. So I have that. And I have talked to Katya and I talked to Delilah. So I've got those twice, all of those hopefully in a week, not always, but and that's wonderful. Sometimes I want esoteric, and sometimes Reva wants to go and whine about something for a few minutes. In terms of my practice, my first commitment is my passion in the outside world is I have 2 half draft, half carriage horses, and my passion is working with draft animals. And the land I live on 80 acres that needs attention. So my mornings go to outdoor work and working my horses. Because to me, working the horses, when you're driving a pair of animals, you all become one. It's a meditation in the sense, because if you're in your mind, they know it. They don't do what you ask for. So it's a practice of all 3 of us and the equipment we're on being one and doing things as one beingness. And so that's my mornings. And then so I have afternoons and some evenings till I get too tired to see clients. So I have clients Monday, 2 days I do more than other days, Mondays and Wednesdays. And how to talk about the practice. I find that I mix in what I like to do if people are not in their bodies, and this is not Sedona Method, so I know, but if the people are open to it, to teach them to be in their bodies so that they can tell when the energy is moving through them and when they're releasing, because I find when people are grounded in their bodies, they can feel the release like that. And so it's much more easy. It's easier for them. So I often, if again, with the person's permission, work on getting them in their bodies, finding their feet. Some of my clients work on physical issues, so that's usually step number 1. And then there's a certain number of clients, I think I found this all the way through my practice. You sort of do 3 sessions, and after 3 sessions, you have them for life, so to speak. You may not meet as often as, but up to 3 sessions, everybody's testing each other out. In terms of something we've talked about elsewhere, I haven't done packages. What I've done, which is a little bit more of a pain, but if I know the people, I'll bill them at the end of the month and suggest that if they work for themselves, which most of the people I do, that they can use the deduction on their Schedule C, that we figure out a way that my work with them is deductible, which won't mean anything to you, Katya, but will mean something to Stephen. So I offer that. In terms of finding new clients, I find it difficult, actually. Yeah, well, it's sort of like I used to do mass mailings when I worked for it, and you'd send out 100,000 mailings and 1% return would be great. And that's the way I sort of feel about doing things on the internet. 1, 2, 5% return is good. Yeah. What else can I say? Yeah, I don't feel like I've figured out how to do the internet yet. I don't feel like I've figured out exactly how to bill. I find the clients I get hooked on, being very honest here, are the ones who want to come in and be fixed around money. Ones that have read the website and think that now when they come to us that they will now be millionaires tomorrow. And
and when you say that you get hooked on them, you mean this is problematic?
Well, I find that they don't stick around, obviously.
Right.
And I get hooked because sometimes I get hooked on wanting to help them fix it and whatever, and they don't want to hear it. Yeah, I had a gentleman come who had lost phenomenal amount of money in a bad business decision. Mm-hmm. And he wanted to get fixed, and he stayed for 5 or 6 sessions, but in the end he left because he couldn't see his way through it. So it's like, how do you transition people? The ones that stay are the ones that understand get the bigger picture. They understand that that there's no quick fix, and that there's other possibilities that intrigue them. But the ones who come to get a new job next week or find, all those, I find that, and those are the ones I've stopped advertising that way, but those are the ones that often come in where they want to get fixed. Mm-hmm. And I asked Hale this question once. You care about and somebody else did the other day, you care about your clients. You care about people who come to you. You want to support them. And sometimes I cross the line between impersonally supporting them and personally supporting them, if you see what I mean. So that's the one I find hard is and they don't stick around.
Could you talk a little bit more about that line between supporting them impersonally and personally? What does that mean for you?
Well, I had never used expression before right then. It's understanding being there for their whole beingness rather than the personality that wants this peg move from A to B.
Got it.
It's what you do when you have clients anyways, but it's holding the bigger space for who they are rather than the little thing that they came in the door for. You don't ignore the little thing they came in the door for, but and if I get hooked into the little thing they came in the door for, then I don't do them or me any good.
Well, so for example, the guy that came to you because he lost all the money wants to regain the money. Well, in fact, it may be more valuable for him to learn acceptance.
Right.
Or to understand the value of money and the relative meaning of money and so forth.
Right. Yeah. And you offer that, and then the person hear it. And obviously they can't hear it. It's not to do with me personally. But every once in a while I get hooked into going, oh, I could just think of some other thing to say to him. You know, that one, if I could think of another way to word it. That's what I mean, fix it. When I get out of that space of being centered and get hooked into, what else can I say? What can we do? He's going to hang up. You know, all that stuff that starts going on your shoulder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The mind stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
I think we've all had that in some, whether we have paid clients or not, but kind of that's wanting the fix or help the other person. It can be a really pain in the process to make it.
Well, to put it another way, what I find is that if I go about facilitating somebody with an agenda, that's just a disaster for me and for them, because first of all, it invites resistance.
Right.
And the other thing is that it just destroys spontaneity. And what really the power of it is what comes up in the moment. Oh, okay, you know, I didn't realize, but that's exactly the problem. That this kind of thing. So.
Yeah, but then again, when we come back to that, there's no doership. We don't choose to do that either. So it's just happening occasionally.
So what happens in those times is I start having a fight with the mind. It's like, there's no doership, shut up. What do you mean there's no doership? You know, and then you're trying to be present with the client. So when it's like the other time on my doing the Hales call, it isn't so much that maybe the client and I didn't have a great time. It's that I feel like I wasn't present for the client. And that feels lousy. That those times where this is going so much that for whatever reason, that's what I mean by hooked. When I get listening to when I get hooked, then I'm not present for you, and then it's not, you know, all the good stuff doesn't happen. And so, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I get that the client will stare, they won't. I just, ready for this one? Since I can't control whether the client can stare or not, I can at least control whether I'm present for them or not.
Oh, of course.
Well, oh, yeah.
Anyway, the thing I would say is the whole thing is delicious, delectable, wonderful, frustrating, annoying, better than any relationship I ever had with any friend or man. But it's wonderful, and it's you know, and some days I'm here, but you know, the incredible thing about Sedona Method, when you're here, gazing at your navel, picking yourself apart, you go, oh yeah, I'm doing it again. As to quote a friend of mine, so what?
Yes, and it definitely is. It's a roller coaster, but it also has this, I don't know which part you like the most, but kind of it has both sides going up and down. So it's not just the horrible part. I don't like roller coasters at all, but whatever kind of your favorite pastime, pleasure thing is, it's both ups and downs. So and I think it was one of the beauty of it is because if it was just bliss and, you know, I think there would be a huge temptation of like, I'm holier than you things coming out for, which then again would prevent us learning more and being able to share it properly, I think.
I think the way I like to put it is that for me, it seems like life becomes about either one of two things, either challenge or celebration. So, when things are really difficult, that just means for me, because of the experience that I've had so far with the method, oh, okay, I'm leveling up, I have to fly down to take care of my aging parents who now have had COVID and things are kind of teeter-totter disastrous. Who knows exactly what's going to happen? Awesome. I didn't realize I was ready for this,
Yep.
Bring it on. And then, there are other times when it just seems like everything is, oh, wow, that's a breakthrough. Now I feel so great. I've achieved whatever it is, because that's also part of the method, isn't it? Yeah. We're
And,
reaching the end of the hour, Katja. I just have to point that out.
and part of the method is having wonderful conversations with wonderful people.
I totally agree. We could continue, but I unfortunately have to pack this up now. But thank you, Reva, for coming here and having this wonderful conversation. It's been a pleasure, as always. And we'll let people know how to find you. We'll put that in the description. And thank you. It's been wonderful. And let's continue learning and enjoying.
And I look forward to listening to more of your podcasts.
Thank you.